What kind of person screams at a disabled woman over a wheelchair ramp? Karen Mitchell, that's who. The town hall meeting in Willow Creek was supposed to be a quiet discussion about community upgrades. But the air was electric with tension the moment Karen stormed in, her heavy footsteps echoing like a warning. Her face, flushed with indignation, twisted into a scowl as she jabbed a finger towards Sarah, a young woman in a wheelchair who'd been advocating for accessibility ramps for months. Sarah's hands gripped the armrests, her knuckles whitening, but her voice stayed steady. She'd come prepared with data, petitions, and a quiet resolve that made Karen's bluster seem almost cartoonish. Almost. The room held its breath, the weight of Karen's words sharp, cruel, and unrelenting, cutting through the murmurs of the small crowd. She didn't just oppose the ramps. She made it personal, calling them a waste of taxpayer money, a blight on the town's charm. Sarah's eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. Karen was a fixture in Willow Creek, the kind of woman who'd complain about a neighbor's lawn being an inch too long or a kid's bike left on the sidewalk. At 5 feet 6 inches and well over 300 pounds, she carried herself with an authority that came less from respect and more from intimidation. Her voice, loud and grating, had a way of drowning out anyone who dared disagree. That night, she was in rare form, her tirade fueled by a mix of self-righteousness and disdain. "This town doesn't need to cater to every whim," she bellowed, her chins quivering as she leaned forward, looming over Sarah. "You think you're entitled to tear up our streets for your little chair?" The word chair dripped with venom, as if Sarah's disability was a choice she'd made to inconvenience everyone else. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Thompson, the town clerk clutching his clipboard, looked like he wanted to vanish into the wood-paneled walls. Mrs. Delaney, an elderly widow who'd known Sarah since she was a child, gasped softly, her hand covering her mouth. Sarah, though, didn't flinch. At 28, she'd faced worse than Karen's tantrums. A car accident 5 years earlier had taken her ability to walk, but it hadn't dulled her spirit. She'd spent the last year gathering signatures, meeting with council members, and researching accessibility laws, determined to make Willow Creek a place where she and others like her could move freely. The proposed ramps weren't just for her. They were for the elderly, for parents with strollers, for anyone who'd ever struggled with the town's uneven sidewalks and steep curbs. She'd presented her case with calm precision. Studies showing ramps increased property values, federal mandates under the ADA, even quotes from local contractors willing to do the work at cost. But Karen wasn't interested in facts. "This is about tradition," she snapped, her voice rising to a near shriek. "We don't need to change everything just because one person complains." The room erupted in whispers, some supportive, some skeptical. Sarah took a deep breath, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "Karen, this isn't about me. It's about fairness. It's about the law. And it's about decency." The word hung in the air, a challenge Karen couldn't ignore. She scoffed, crossing her arms over her chest, her floral blouse straining at the seams. "Decency? Don't lecture me about decency when you're trying to bankrupt this town." The accusation was absurd. Sarah's plan was fully funded by a federal grant, but Karen's outrage was a performance, and she was playing to the crowd. A few nodded hesitantly, swayed by her volume if not her logic. Others, like Mrs. Delaney, looked at Sarah with quiet pride, urging her to keep going. Then came the twist no one saw coming. As Karen turned to rally her supporters, her purse overstuffed and dangling from her elbow caught on the edge of a folding chair. It tipped, crashing to the floor with a metallic clang, spilling its contents across the room. Lipstick, receipts, a half-eaten candy bar, and a small, worn photo, fluttering to a stop near Sarah's wheelchair. Sarah glanced down, her eyes widening. It was a picture of a younger Karen, maybe 20 years ago, standing next to a man in a wheelchair. The man's smile was warm, his arm around Karen's waist. The room froze, Karen's face drained of color, her bravado crumbling as she scrambled to snatch the photo back. "That's none of your business," she snapped, but her voice cracked, betraying something raw, something human. Sarah didn't push, but the image lingered in her mind. A crack in Karen's armor no one had expected. The meeting ended in a stalemate. Karen stormed out, vowing to fight the ramps at every turn. Sarah stayed behind, answering questions from a few curious residents, her voice steady but her heart racing. The photo had shaken her, not because it changed her view of Karen, but because it hinted at a story she couldn't unsee. Who was that man? Why did Karen carry his picture? And why was she so hell-bent on denying others the access he'd clearly needed? As Sarah wheeled out into the cool night air, she felt a mix of exhaustion and resolve. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The weeks that followed were a battle of wills. Sarah doubled down, organizing rallies and handing out flyers, her determination fueled by Karen's venom. The town split like a cracked windshield. Some backed Sarah, inspired by her quiet strength. Others rallied behind Karen, drawn to her loud promises to protect Willow Creek's charm. Karen wasn't just opposing ramps now. She was waging a war. She plastered signs around town, bold letters screaming, "Save our streets." She cornered council members at the diner, her voice carrying over plates of meatloaf and mashed potatoes. "You let this girl win, and next thing you know, we'll be tearing down the gazebo for a parking lot." Her exaggerations were wild, but they worked on some, especially those who feared change more than they valued fairness. Sarah, meanwhile, found allies in unexpected places. Mrs. Delaney started baking cookies for Sarah's rallies, her arthritic hands trembling as she handed out treats to supporters. Mr. Thompson, the timid clerk, quietly slipped Sarah a copy of the town's budget, highlighting surplus funds that could cover any ramp-related costs Karen claimed would bankrupt them. Even Jake, the local hardware store owner, offered to donate materials, his gruff voice softening when he saw Sarah's determination. "My mom's in a walker now," he muttered. "This matters." Sarah's campaign grew, her petition swelling with signatures, her voice steady at every meeting. But Karen was relentless, her anger a tidal wave that threatened to drown Sarah's progress. Then came the twist that turned the tide. At a packed council meeting, Karen stood to deliver another tirade, her face red, her hands waving like a conductor gone mad. Sarah sat in the front row, her wheelchair a quiet rebuke to Karen's noise. But as Karen ranted about outsiders and special treatment, a soft voice interrupted from the back. "Karen, why don't you tell them about your brother?" It was Mrs. Delaney, her frail frame trembling but her eyes blazing. The room went silent. Karen froze, her mouth half open, her hands dropping to her sides. "What?" she stammered, but Mrs. Delaney pressed on. "Your brother, Tom. The one in the wheelchair. The one you took care of until he passed. Why are you fighting this when you know what it's like?" The revelation hit like a thunderclap. Karen's brother. The man in the photo. The room buzzed with shock, eyes darting between Karen's stunned face and Sarah's wide-eyed realization. Karen tried to recover, her voice rising in defense. "Don't you dare bring Tom into this. This isn't about him." But the damage was done. The crowd saw her not as a crusader but as a hypocrite, her rage a mask for something deeper, something broken. Sarah seized the moment, her voice calm but piercing. "Karen, if you know what it's like to love someone who needed help, why can't you see why this matters? This isn't just for me. It's for everyone who's ever felt stuck." For the first time, Karen had no retort. She sank into her chair, her face a mix of anger and shame, the photo of her brother burning in her mind. The council voted that night, 4-1 in favor of the ramps. Karen's lone dissent was drowned out by applause, but her eyes stayed fixed on the floor. Sarah felt no triumph, only a strange pity. She'd won, but the victory was bittersweet, colored by the glimpse of Karen's pain. As the crowd dispersed, Sarah wheeled over to Karen, who sat alone, her purse clutched like a lifeline. "I'm sorry about your brother," Sarah said softly. Karen's head snapped up, her eyes wet but defiant. "You don't know anything," she spat, but her voice lacked its usual fire. Sarah nodded, wheeling away, leaving Karen to wrestle with her ghosts. The ramps went up over the next month, sleek and sturdy, blending into the town's sidewalks like they'd always been there. Sarah tested the first one herself, her wheelchair gliding smoothly, a quiet smile breaking across her face. The town felt different now, more open, more kind. But Karen was nowhere to be seen. She stopped coming to meetings, stopped posting signs. Rumors swirled. She was embarrassed. She was angry. She was gone. Sarah wondered about her, about the brother who'd shaped her in ways no one understood. She didn't hate Karen, not anymore. She just wished she could understand. Fate, it seems, has a cruel sense of humor. 3 months after the ramps were installed, Karen Mitchell slipped on a patch of ice outside the diner, her ankle twisting with a sickening crack. The fall was public, humiliating, right in front of the hardware store where Jake was sweeping the sidewalk. He rushed to help, but Karen waved him off, her face contorted in pain and pride. "I'm fine," she snapped, but she wasn't. The X-ray showed a clean break, and the doctor's orders were clear. No weight on the leg for 6 weeks. Crutches were an option, but at Karen's size, they were impractical. The hospital sent her home with a temporary wheelchair, a clunky, second-hand model that creaked under her weight. Karen, the woman who'd railed against ramps, was now reliant on one. The first time she used it, she avoided the town center, sticking to the quiet streets near her house. But errands piled up, and pride couldn't outweigh necessity. She wheeled herself to the grocery store, her face burning as she navigated the new ramp she'd fought so hard against. The slope was gentle, the surface smooth, but every inch felt like a betrayal. Passers-by stared, some with pity, others with a glint of satisfaction. Mrs. Delaney, carrying a bag of apples, paused to watch, her expression unreadable. Karen didn't meet her eyes. She didn't meet anyone's. The ramp, once a symbol of her defeat, was now her only path forward. Sarah heard about the accident through the grapevine. She didn't gloat, her heart wasn't built for it, but she couldn't ignore the irony. She saw Karen one afternoon, struggling to maneuver her wheelchair through a narrow aisle in the pharmacy. Karen's face was a storm of frustration, her hands fumbling with the wheels. Sarah hesitated, then wheeled over. "Need a hand?" she asked, her voice free of malice. Karen's head jerked up, her eyes narrowing. "I don't need your pity," she growled, but the words lacked venom. Sarah shrugged, unfazed. "It's not pity, it's just a hand." For a moment, Karen said nothing, her jaw tight. Then, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. Sarah helped guide her through the aisle, the silence between them heavy but not hostile. That encounter broke something open. Not friendship, not quite, but a grudging respect. Karen started appearing in public more, her wheelchair a constant reminder of her own words turned against her. She didn't apologize, not directly, but she stopped fighting the ramps. One day, Sarah caught her staring at the ramp outside the library, her expression unreadable. "They did a good job," Karen muttered, almost to herself. Sarah nodded, sensing the weight behind the words. It wasn't much, but it was something. The legal consequences came later. Karen's public outbursts had caught the attention of a disability rights group, who filed a complaint with the state. The investigation was swift. Karen's actions at the town meetings, recorded and widely shared, violated local anti-discrimination ordinances. She was fined $2,000 and ordered to attend sensitivity training. The punishment stung, but not as much as the whispers that followed her, the legacy of her own making. She paid the fine without protest, her silence louder than her rants had ever been. Willow Creek changed after that. The ramps weren't just concrete and steel. They were a symbol of something bigger. Sarah became a quiet hero, her name synonymous with resilience. She started a local advocacy group, helping other towns navigate accessibility laws, her voice carrying farther than she'd ever imagined. Karen, meanwhile, faded into the background, her wheelchair a temporary prison but a permanent lesson. She never spoke of her brother, but Sarah saw her once, sitting alone in the park, clutching that worn photo, her eyes distant but softer than before. Life has a way of teaching what pride won't allow. Karen's fall wasn't just physical. It was a reckoning, a mirror held up to her own contradictions. For Sarah, the fight was never about winning, it was about opening doors, literal and figurative, for those who needed them. And in the end, Willow Creek wasn't just a town with ramps. It was a place where empathy, hard-won and imperfect, began to take root. Where even the loudest voices could learn to listen, and even the hardest hearts could crack open, just enough to let the light in.